Well, hello everyone, welcome back guys. Hope you all are doing well. This is Mohammad Badruddja and today we are going to solve lab number 3 from GraphQL API Vulnerabilities module from Portfolio. So before going further, this little disclaimer as always for you. This video and its content are only for educational and awareness purpose and I do not support any unethical or illegal act. That's been said, let's go and we see first what this lab is all about. So this is lab number 3 and we are going to find the hidden GraphQL endpoint. Condition is there. The user management functions for this lab are powered by hidden GraphQL endpoint, and you won't be able to find this endpoint by simply clicking pages in the site. So as similar to the previous labs where we click on different links on the web page and we found GraphQL endpoint, but here the endpoint is hidden, so we won't be able to find this endpoint by simply browsing the application. So the endpoint also has some defenses against introspection. So that means there are some defenses already applied, some controls are already applied on the introspection feature. So to solve the lab, find the hidden endpoint and delete the Carlos account. Fine, so there is our lab and I am simply first of all going to browse this application to see what we get, and I'm going to enable the web proxy on my browser. Let's hit the home button and we get the request here, but that does not belongs to GraphQL. Go to my account. Again, it redirects us to the login page where we can try to log in. Cybersec radar and anything, just a random username password and invalid username and password. Also we did not find here any GraphQL endpoint. Go back to the home and let's try to view some details of this product, and again we can see this is the request, but here also we do not land to the GraphQL endpoint. So this is the very initial phase of any penetration testing, especially once you are engaging with the web application. So at that instant, the first phase is reconnaissance, where you gather as much information as you can, because the more information you have, the more surface you have to find the vulnerabilities and the more attack vectors you have maybe. So these initial phase contain something like subdomain enumeration, directory enumeration, file enumeration. So I'm going to just use this technique to actually find out if there is any endpoint that is related to the GraphQL. This is very basic and this is the first phase of any penetration testing. So I'm going to send this very first request to the repeater and go to the repeater, send this request. Actually, I needed to send this request to the intruder. Go to the intruder, clear everything. And here, let's say I'm going to say ASDF or anything you want. And I am going to add this as the position. And the attack type sniper is already there, it's fine. Go to the payload and here I'm going to add some default GraphQL endpoints. You see those endpoints frequently for the GraphQL, although you can here load a word list for the file or directory enumeration. But to just show you the methodology, I'm just going to add some endpoint like GraphQL, add GraphQL/v1, add GraphQL/API, API or v1, and let's see if we find something from these endpoints. Start the attack. Okay, I'm using community edition at this moment, and as you can see, all the request status are 404, but there is one interesting request, one interesting endpoint, which is API, and you can see this status, its status is different from other requests. The status code is 400 and the length also different, which is 162. So this is going to be interesting. There is the request, you can see /API, and the method is get. So I would like to see the response, and in the response there is an indicator, query not present. That means once this request is sent to the server or sent to this API try to find out some kind of query, but because there is no query, so it gave us a message which is query not found. So it is very convincing that maybe this point belongs to the GraphQL. So go back to the close this, and we will go to the repeater, and let's try to add here API. Send this request again, and we found the same message, query not found. That means we need to send some kind of query here, but which query and how? Because we do not know about the schema, we do not know about the objects, what objects could be there. So there is one thing, there is one query, and the query is known as universal query, which could be sent like query and here __ type name, this query. So this is universal query. Why? Because this field, okay, this field actually reserved for every GraphQL endpoint. So whenever you send this query to any GraphQL endpoint, you will get a specific response. But because we are using the get method, so we need to pass this as parameter. So we can specify API query is equal to, and this is going to be your value of this parameter query. So let's take this, copy back there, come back here and paste that and send this request. So once we send this request, we should get some specific response, which is this, and I can show you that. So if we close the burp suite and here finding GraphQL endpoints, so there is universal query. Okay, so you can see here, if you send this query to any GraphQL endpoint, it will include the string this in the response, which we already have here. So somewhere in its response, and this is known as universal query and is useful tool in probing whether a URL corresponds to a GraphQL service or not. So that response, that particular response in the body, what we saw, this particular response tell us that we are engaging with the GraphQL service through this /API endpoint. Okay, and the query works because every GraphQL endpoint has a reserved field called __ type name that returns the queried object's type as a string. So I hope you understand that from where I bring this query. This is very important that you understand few of the default queries of the GraphQL similar to this universal query, right? So now we are confirmed that we are engaging, this endpoint is 100% GraphQL service endpoint. But the thing is, job is still not completed. We need to delete the Carlos account to solve the lab, and there is some defenses against the introspection. So the second part, our main purpose is to reach up to the schema. This is our goal, and to call that schema, to get the information about that schema, we need to execute introspection query. Okay, so let's go back again here and let's try to find out, go to the request method where they mention the request method. Where is it? Yeah, this here, there is it, discovering schema information. So the next phase is we need to use introspection. We need to try to gather the information about the schema, discover the schema through probing for introspection. So there is a request for probing introspection, and this is your query. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take this and go back to our repeater, and instead of this field underscore underscore type name, I'm going to pass this, send this again, and as you can see, we get another error message saying GraphQL introspection is not allowed, but the query contained underscore underscore schema and underscore underscore type. So that means we are close. So let's go and we see further. So there is a full introspection query which you can execute, and this is the full introspection query, which contains all the mutation type, subscription type, and derivatives, okay, fragment fields, everything, all the methods are there. So we need to copy this query. Actually, it is a long query, and this is known as full introspection query. So I'm going to copy this query, Control C, come back here, open a new tab, and I'm going to paste that here. Okay, so just Control A, copy this again, and you can use CyberChef, and you can also use decoder. Why I'm going to use decoder? Because this query contains a lot of special characters and spaces. So I want to, because this is the GET request and we are passing these queries as the value of a parameter, so we should convert this into the URL encoded form. So just go here, encode as URL. Okay, so this is completely encoded value of this query. It's Control A, copy again, back to the repeater, and instead of this query, instead of this, I'm going to paste that, send this again, and this time again it's saying, it's giving us the same error. Actually, the problem here is because in the lab description they already mentioned there are some defenses against introspection. So if we see this, sometimes what happened, this specific string is denied or blocked or filtered. Okay, so whenever the query executed containing this complete line, it is not going to execute that. Okay, so this is a defense part, but there are always a way to bypass things. So what we can do to bypass that filter, or maybe the control, we can just put enter here, so that now in this line there is only underscore underscore schema is left. So now again I'm going to decoder, okay, and here I'm just going to put enter here, okay, and encode it as URL. It's already encoded here, so I'm going to copy this again, come back to the repeater, and this time instead of that I'm going to send this. And wonderful, now something happened because the errors got changed and the message got changed. Now let's see what this error message is saying. There is validation error, field undefined, underscore underscore schema slash directives on operation field, directive is undefined. Okay, in the second message, in the second error message, it's saying on fragment directive is undefined, and in the third message it's saying on field directive is undefined. So sometime what happened, in GraphQL, many times the endpoints do not support these directives. So this is /API endpoint, and this endpoint is not supporting these on operation, on fragment, and on field. These directives are not supported by this endpoint. So what we need to do, we need to actually delete these. You can see on operation, on fragment, on field. So just delete these, and once again copy Control A, Control C, back here, go to the decoder, Control A, delete this and paste the new one. So you can see there is a schema, curly braces is there, and there is no on operation, on field, on fragment is not there. And this is the URL encoded form. So I'm going to Control A, Control C, back to the repeater, and here I'm going to paste that. Send again. And wonderful, we got the schema. So this is the schema information. And as you can see, the type here is mutation type, subscription type, and one important thing is kind is input object, and the name of this is delete organization user input. So you can manually review or statically review this schema, or there is another way, because this schema, as you can see, too big. So you can do it by copying this whole body section of the schema of this response. Okay, so the body section starts from here. I'm going to copy this back to our little mouse pad, open a new tab, paste this schema completely, and I'm going to save it on my desktop by name schema.json. So go to the NQL scanner, and here you can see you can pass the URL or the file location. So this time we don't have the URL. We have the URL /API, but is disabled or with the defenses. So we manually find out the schema, and we have the schema.json file. So go to the load button, and from here go to the desktop and just load this schema.json, and here we have the schema. So double click on it. We have mutation, we have query. Inside mutation there is delete organization user query, which we saw here. Delete organization user input. Okay, so this is the query, and this query is used to delete the user, and we need to pass the ID of the user to delete that user. Second, in the query, if we expand this, we found here one more query, which is get user. So in this way, by specifying the ID of the user, you can find out the details of the user, and the details of the user you will find only ID and the username. These two fields only defined here, right? So let's go and we take this copy, because first of all, what we need to do to solve the lab, we need to delete the Carlos user, but we actually don't know this Carlos user have ID 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We don't know his ID. So first of all, we need to query the user to identify the Carlos ID. Come back here again, delete this part and mention the query. Fine, and let's just hit send button. Protocol error. Okay, fine, protocol error, because here we did not use URL encoded form. So Control U, you can use Control U, or you can go to the convert selection, URL, and all characters or just key characters. So I'm going to just key character so that I can change this ID. Okay, send this, and as you can see, get user is null, because 1334 there is no user having this ID. Now the things are very simple. Just put the ID value 1, and let's see who has ID 1. Administrator. Wonderful. Let's change ID to 2. Who has ID 2? Wiener. Wonderful. Let's see who has ID 3. Send this, and boom, the Carlos user has ID 3. Now I think you already know that what you need to do. Now we know that Carlos has ID 3. So go to the NQL scanner, and we already saw there is one query, mutation query, to delete the user. So just take this, copy back to the repeater, and you need to just specify the mutation query to delete the user. And here, instead of 1334 ID, you must type ID3 to delete the Carlos user, and we need to encode this in the URL format, URL encoding. So key characters, send this request, and hopefully yes, we get the right response, and the user containing ID3 is already deleted. So that means if we come here, oh, we already solved the lab. So that's it for this video. Hope you understand the concept. Hope you enjoyed the video, and please, if you like the content, like, subscribe and share. See you in the next video. Bye.